Uh, Hi, we are today with Maria Cernat from Romania. And could you present yourself?
Hello. Hello, Mikhail. Thank you for inviting me. My name is indeed Maria Cernat. Thank you for the very good pronunciation. I teach in Romania in two universities, Titu Maiorescu University and the National School of Political Sciences and Public Administration. I teach in a communication and public relation department at both universities. And my main fields of interest are media theory and critical theory and discourse analysis. I am also the vice president of an NGO here in Romania, the Institute of Social Solidarity, that I founded along with some comrades like 2 years ago. And I am also an editor at the Barricade, where I co-host the podcast on the Barricades with Boyan Stanislavski, the founder of this journalistic collective.
Yes, because it is why I invite you, because your collective is very important for the building internationalized solidarity in Eastern Europe. And could you say something more about your view politics? What do you think about capitalism? What do you think about restoration capitalism in Romania in 1989? And what is your project for future?
Well, to tell you the truth, I was not a leftist all my life. As each and every one of us, especially in Romania, I was a right-winger. Actually, because I was not exposed to elements regarding critical theory. I must tell you that I graduated from the University of Bucharest, and I graduated from the Faculty of Journalism and Communication Science. And also, I am a graduate of the Faculty of Philosophy, and we never discussed Marx, we never discussed critical theory, or if we discussed it, it was never from a very assumed, as I would say, point of view. And I spent 8 years in the Faculty of Philosophy at the University of Bucharest, 4 years for my bachelor degrees, and 4 years I had a scholarship for my PhD in philosophy. And there was very little talk on Marx and his works. So basically, from a political point of view, I started to discuss and to engage more with these topics once I became a worker, an intellectual laborer, as I like to call myself right now. And I started working in a private university, and I saw that we had no union, and I saw that if you were lucky to have good colleagues and a good boss, everything was okay. But once things changed, and you started to have problems and not problems on a personal level, even though those are important too, but problems as a worker. I mean, your payment was not okay. You were forced to do a lot of things that were not related to what your work contract was saying. You were made to do all sorts of things that were quite humiliating and diminishing for you, and you had nowhere to go and to complain. And this is when I started to really think about unions, to really think about our status as intellectual laborers. And it got a bit more problematic once they started to impose in Romania a very interesting system of evaluating and assessing scientific merit. What do I mean by that? You are hired in a university to teach courses, but this is not enough. They thought that they should also make you made research because it is important for you to be aware of all the things that are new in your field. Okay, but it from a very legitimate request, it started to grow. And then they started to say that you are required to bring money to the university. And that was a very interesting requirement. You see, you are required to give money to come up with money for your institution. It was like you were paying the institution to let you work there. You see, it was a very perverse and reverse relation. And it is a good thing that in Romania, it is only at the beginning. And luckily for us, the academic establishment is very conservative and corrupt. I wouldn't think that I would got to the point to say where the fact that the academic establishment is so retrograde is actually a good thing. Why? Because I have a stable work contract, and because these things that are very popular in Western academia in Romania are just at the beginning. But it was enough to raise my consciousness and to help me, escape this false consciousness that if you work hard enough, you can make it, that you can rely on yourself, that we live in a meritocracy, and so on and so forth. And started to read about academic capitalism. Those were my first, the first books that I read, because they made us, besides the research grants that we were supposed to apply for, they made us publish articles, but it was not clear how many and for how much money. But they said if you want to advance to get a promotion, and if you want to become from lecturer, senior lecturer, then you have to have like a number of articles, a number of citation, and in journals, academic journals that are indexed in databases owned by, of course, foreign and Western universities. So you are basically forced, in order to get a promotion, to work for free for international journals, you see? And this is where it got me, why are you not paying me for this? I mean, I have to earn like academic prestige. Well, I get it, but I don't eat prestige, I eat bread like everybody else. So how is this possible, And to this day, it is not clear, how much how much money should I get for an article that is indexed in international databases? And among these databases, there is also a hierarchy. There is this E.C. Thompson that is now bought by the Chinese, but it was based in the US, an international database that is very famous, and in Romania is praised like the best one because the best journals are there. And you have to publish there for free. They are giving you nothing, And if you are not native, because I'm not an English native speaker, you have to pay for translation, and you have to pay for editing your text, because it has to be at the level that a graduate from Cambridge or Oxford would be. So it has to be excellent. And you have to pay if you're not a native speaker or you didn't get the chance to study abroad for a long period of time. So these are the things that make me rethink the whole world, I mean, it took a while, and it was only in my 30s that I became aware of the fact that basically, we are intellectual laborers. We are made to sell our labor and to work for free for international corporations, and with little reward, I may say so. And there are a lot of things that are not okay in research. There are people that earn grants like €1 million, and we have 3 persons in the whole Romanian academy that earn this type of grant, And I find it a little bit troubling, because it is a concentration of capital and power that is not going to lead to something good. If you want to have research, you have to have systematic investment done by the state, not this, very glamorous successes of 3 individuals. this is not enough, to build a strategy and research. But this is the capitalist society that we live in. And then I started to see, if I, living and working in a university, have to face this type of oppression and this type of social injustice, imagine how bad it is for people that are not in a privileged position like me. And I started looking into things, and starting seeing the world from a new, different perspective, and starting reading a lot of critical theory that I read during my years in while I was a student. But I was not aware of all the consequences because I was protected, I was living in a bubble. And once, I became a worker, then things started to change for me.
It's very interesting, which you said. In the context of the Polish counter-revolution, I can say that in Poland in 1960s we have a new generation of the Poles who became students, because before war in Poland the university was only for the rich. After war university was for all, and with this we have in 1960s the generation of new students who was a child of the communist leaders, but they are not happy, and they started to have a protest. We have a protest of the student in 1968, and after many intellectuals, for example Professor Bronisław Geremek, he became advisor of the Solidarność. So it is Wałęsa who was ruling this organization, but all this decision important about with who Solidarność have to collaborate. It is Geremek who lived also in Paris. He traveled a lot. So this history which you said about these intellectuals, it is said that these students in 1960s, they didn't know it. They didn't know it that if they want the capitalism for the intellectuals, it is it is work for free, and with the and you have to pay for the translation.
Yes, I know. Well, the situation in Poland, I know it because I wrote a review for a very interesting book that was analyzing the sociology departments all over Eastern Europe. And especially in Poland, you had the lack of having people that were truly committed to the communist ideals and to the socialist ideas. What do I mean by that? Well, by that, people would normally understand that they were Stalinists and authoritarians. Not at all. In Poland, they had this idea that they have to give equal opportunity, and especially for those who are poor. They were conducting research to see how many students from poor background are in the university and how would they invest in bringing to the university people and students from very different environments in terms of economic status. That was very important, and I find it to be truly revolutionary. I mean, it was their purpose, and they didn't do it just formally, just to bring them and give them a diploma. No, they had, from what I read in that book, they had an 8-hour program, and all the professors in the universities were paying attention to these students and were working hard with them to bring them to the same levels as those who came from privileged environments. I found this to be truly revolutionary and extraordinary. Extraordinary. This is how you raise a society, and this is how you make things progress in a society, when you give for real each and every individual a chance. And this is what I read happened in the university with a very interesting program. First of all, they had as objective bringing people from poor backgrounds into the university and then truly helping them, not just putting them there and giving them a diploma, you know. Because what happened in Romania, unfortunately, they have this ideal, the same ideal, that they should bring people from very poor and marginalized people from the economic point of view into the university. But that would mean that they would bring people with no education and just transform somebody who was a doorman and put them in a university and transform him into a senior lecturer, you know. And that created a lot of problems, especially in the 50s. While you were investing for real in the people that came from poor environments, in Romania, they just took them and placed them in positions of power without truly helping them, you know, and this is very interesting.
Yes, it's the name of this. It is punkty za pochodzenie po polsku. In Polish, it is punkty. It is point. You know, if you are from working class and the peasant class, they give you extra point in the exam. So now I would like to ask you a question about Romania. Before, could you Romania in the time of the socialism and Romania today? So the first question: what do you think about the Romania? Do you think that it was socialist state, it was the state capitalism, or it is dictator, or what do you think about this? And could you say what was the advantages of this society and compare to the society which is today in Romania?
Well, it is difficult to answer such a question. I would say that unfortunately it depends how you define socialism. If you think of the state owning the means of production, yes, Romania was a socialist society. If you think that the workers should have had more power, then no, Romania was not a socialist society, because what happened was that a new red aristocracy, and I like to call it, was formed. That is, people from the political apparatus, people from Securitate started to have the power. It was not the power of the workers, but the powers of a new type of elite. Now, these new elites were not as, how should I say, the inequality between those elites and the working class was not at all as pronounced, as important as it is now, of course, but it was a difference. And unfortunately, the working class advanced a lot, because Ceausescu, first of all, he built a lot of social houses, and the right to houses was guaranteed. There was no housing market. The state built a lot of houses, and even though they are not excellent in terms of quality, we are still relying on that social houses that Ceausescu built in Romania. We have to admit that. We were not able in 30 years to build not a tenth of what he was able to build. And of course, there are a lot of discussions, because there were a lot of criticism, because they were not very well thought, that he didn't take into account the advices of important architects. Anyway, he built a lot, and people moved, because you have to understand 80%, more than 80% of the Romanian population in 1945 was illiterate. We come from very humble tradition and origins. We have to admit that. Romania was extremely poor and extremely rural, because most of the population lived in villages, was a rural population. And you have to understand that in 1945, when the communists came, only 2% of the women gave birth in a hospital, and 80% of the population was illiterate. So the civilizational, step forward was huge, because all these people that lived in huts and lived in very improper conditions in villages, in improvised, buildings and so on and so forth, were given the opportunity to live in this block of flats that were modern and very different from what they came from. I mean, if you compare Ceausescu's block of flats with very modern buildings, of course they are not okay. But if you compare them with the conditions that the people that started to live in them came from, you might have a different opinion. So this was very important. Also in terms of women's rights, so we didn't have the problems that the Westerners have, like they were allowed, especially in Britain, to be paid the same in the 60s, and it was a struggle for the women to get paid the same amount of money for the same job. That was not a problem in Romania, and communists encouraged women to enter the labor force. Now, the problem is that in terms of cultural values, they were very retrograde. While the Westerners had their sexual revolutions in 1968, the Romanians, namely Ceausescu, just banned homosexuality and made it a crime to be a homosexual. He actually imprisoned people for being gay. Okay, just to give you, and in 1966 he banned abortions because he wanted to make Romania great. I always say, especially, I hope you don't take it as an offense, that men tend to be stupid in the same way. They have the same obsessions, making the country great, this obsession with having huge numbers of people in your country. And he did it by controlling and unleashing state violence against women. So it was rather, it's a complicated story. And of course, we have now, along with Bulgaria, the largest number of women working in science, for instance, because women were encouraged, truly encouraged, to enter the labor force and to take responsibilities even in fields that prior to that were restricted only to men. So it was okay from this point of view. Now, lately, what I think happened in Romania is that the people from Securitate got capital because they were allowed to trade with the West, and the Communist Party was just there to stay in their way. They wanted to become capitalist. Mental colonization. They didn't believe in the system. And what actually happened in the last years of Ceausescu's rule is that he became xenophobic, and he became a very, how should I put it, right-wing, actually, in terms of cultural values. I mean, he said that the women should give birth to 4 children, and only after that they were allowed to have an abortion. He said that homosexuals are an aberration and they should be imprisoned. He said that Hungary is a danger, a national threat, and he had this obsession with Hungary, so he was growing xenophobic by the day. And he was trying to move further and further away from the Soviet Union and to build a so-called independent Romania. Okay, he took a loan from the IMF, and then he saw that the conditions were harsh, and he wanted it to pay back the loan. And we experienced, me as a child, I experienced the whole period from the 80s to the 90s, 1989, when he was killed, of extreme poverty, because he had this ambition to pay the debt. And the irony of history is that now, after 1989, Poland had a huge debt, but it was forgiven just like that. And Romania, who fought so hard to pay it, well, we paid it, but it was so unfair in a way that Poland was just forgiven after 1989 and after taking down communism. And after 1989, it was a huge destruction of everything. I mean, we were so enthusiastic. I keep telling Westerners and you this story that in 1989, 1989, we were literally crying. I remember I was right here in my parents' home, and we first heard what is now the song, it is now the national anthem. And we were so happy, and we thought that we are going to live at least as the top 1% in the USA. You know, we were convinced that capitalism is the way, and competition, and meritocracy, and individualism, and free initiative and free market. We were like drugged, you know. It was like we were on drugs. We believed this type of propaganda so much, and we had literally no critical perspective. I mean, I remember my father, he was a worker in a very big factory producing fur coats near the town Deva. I am now in the western part.
What?
Well, I am now in Deva, a small town in the western part of the country, and this huge factory of 3,500 workers worked there producing fur coats, and they were basically
coats. Yes.
Fur coats for and they were selling them to Russia, these fur coats that they produced in large numbers. I mean, my father told me that they had the ability to produce 11,000 fur coats a day. Can you imagine what? So it was a huge factory, but they were unsatisfied what was going on. And I remember that in 1989, my father, in December, when the revolution started, he told me that he climbed the building of his factory and he took down the letters socialist, because on the factory it was written with the letters the Socialist Republic of Romania, and he took down the letters. That was his revolution. And now the factory does not exist. It is in ruin. And this is, in short, the story of Romania after 1989. Huge enthusiasm, revolution. Yes, we are going to live like Westerners, and now everything is in ruin. Almost 4 million people left the country. They work abroad. 150,000 children are left alone in Romania. Suicide rates among these children are skyrocketing. Depression, and the fact that they are left alone here in Romania to be taken care of by relatives, grandparents, is a social disaster. So.
Okay, I would like to add about this flat, which are constructed, built in the time of the Ceausescu, that in Poland we also lived generally in the building built in the time of the Polish socialists, especially in the 70s, in the time of Gierek, and the quality of this building built in 1970s is better than the building which are constructed now, because this building which is building now, they are very often after 5 years many problems, because they try to earn money. It is not good quality.
To cut the cost and to be efficient.
Yes, it's efficient, and this is. But I would like to ask you about this term which you used, red aristocracy, because aristocracy, it's for me, when we regard the feudal society, we have the peasant and the nobles, and there are no possibility for the peasant became a nobles. We have this situation in the United States now, that all the politicians which are ruling in the United States, they are rich. All the people in the government of the Trump, they are very rich. Trump, it is milliardaire, and the people in his government are very rich. So I don't see possibility for the working class in the USA to become a president of the there are maybe Ocasio-Cortez, but for Virginia, for eight, be the chef, the president, you have to be rich. And I want to ask you if on Romania was this situation, that this red aristocracy, it is a closed caste, all the workers and the peasant from Romania became the ruling class in this society, in this by party.
Yes, you know what happened? Well, what happened was that soon enough, those who were in power were from certain families. This is what I talk about the red aristocracy. There were some from certain families. They were in a position of power, and it was very hard to enter, to become a member of that elite. And what is even worse, that there were two types of elites. The one that came through the line of the Communist Party, so that was the communists from the top management of the Communist Party, and the ones who came from Securitate. Now, those ones were the worst, and those ones, I think, literally produced the revolution or helped produce it, and it was a clash between those two elites in Romania, and unfortunately those from the security apparatus won the battle. And it was very difficult to reach these echelons of power and to climb the professional ladder, so to speak. It was not impossible. During the first years of communism, a lot of people that came from a poor background and were marginalized got the chance to reach, the higher levels of the professional ladder. But then it was a little bit more difficult to enter politics and to become, an important leader. And that was because you had to sign an agreement with the secret services. Everything was controlled, unfortunately. You could not just go and say, oh, I want to become the secretary of the party, the leader of the party. It was not like that. I mean, you had to sign agreements with the secret police, and you had to... This was awful, especially in Romania, and it is a very dark chapter that was not enough investigated, unfortunately. It's like an open wound, because the secret police here was very powerful, and they were basically encouraging people to turn against against each other, one against the other, and to write reports about the jokes you might have said in a meeting, that you joked about Ceausescu, or that you had an encounter with a foreigner and you told him that Ceausescu's wife is a stupid cow or something like that. And they were written, And this type of thing produced not solidarity and collective thinking in Romania. And this is why I think the effects of capitalism were amplified in Romania, because we were already a society dominated by paranoia. I remember I took a beating from my mother because I told her, look, I spoke today with my classmate and I told her that we are listening to Radio Free Europe, and my mother froze. I said, you said what? Are you insane? Don't you realize that's a secret and you have to keep it as a secret because they can arrest us? And it was no joke, but my mother got arrested at one point for no reason. I mean, my mother was the most anti-political and neutral person that you can imagine. She was preoccupied with us getting enough food and managing the house, a fierce manager of the house, I may say so. But she had nothing to do and no interest in making no revolution in Romania, and she got arrested at some point, and she was taken for one night at the secret services, and she told me that she was not able to sleep for 3 weeks afterwards. She had to be on medication for a long time because she was terrorized, and that was horrible. So that put a lot of pressure on Romanian society, and it made it, it killed our antibodies. The social community, the common trust that you may have in a society was destroyed. And when the capitalism came, we had no antibodies, because this type of relations in a society based on trust, on solidarity, were weakened, were somehow weakened by this type of aggression, by the Securitate. And when the capitalism came, it found us with no defense system, no social informal defense system, It is true that unlike now, we had a common enemy, and this type of pressure created a form of resistance and solidarity, But at the same time, it also created paranoia. And I told you, it's a very dark chapter in Romanian's recent history that was not studied enough, in my opinion.
Okay, let's talk about the actual situation in Romania. I want to say that I don't know very situation in Romania, but I listen your an interview in the Baricade Channel, so I have impression that Poland and Romania are in the competition. Which country will be the most poorest in the Europe? Which country will send the most workers in the Western Europe to work there? Which country will be the most the best friend of the United States? So I know Poland. It's very right-wing country with. And what is your perspective for the future for Romania, for the left in the Romania, for the, I don't know, socialism Romania? If you fight for socialism, what do you want to do?
Well, the problem is the following. Romania had Social Democrat Party. Let me explain you what are the main political forces here. The Social Democrat Party was a party that economically gave people some money. They raised the minimum wage, they gave nurses and doctors consistent salaries, and that was good because they did it in 2017, and it was good because they no longer migrated to the Western countries, and we had people to rely on now that we have the pandemic, and we have to give them that. But in terms of cultural values, they're awful. They supported in 2018 a referendum saying that a family is only a union between a man and a woman and not a union between spouses, fearing that gay marriage might be a possibility here in Romania. So in terms of cultural values, they are unbelievably conservative and right-wing and nationalist, and they support all sorts of characters that are, singers and influencers that are nationalist. It's a disaster. I remember somebody told me a joke that after 1989, a delegation with Europeans, Trotskyists, communists, leftists came to Romania, and they met with these social democrats. And the social democrats took them on tour to visit churches. And not only did they visit churches, but social democrats, because we have this ritual of, kissing the icons in the churches, and they started making the sign, and kissing, and those Trotskyists and communists were, in shock when seeing that. This is the Social Democratic Party. Now, The other ones are libertarians that, you know, Romania is like the museum of ideology. I mean, they are discussing as if we are in 1980s in the Reagan era, you know. They have all this idea, privatization, let's privatize everything, let's be market friendly, free initiative. I mean, I read the like 25 pages. I haven't read that long, and it is a almost 200 pages long governing program that those who are in power right now and are the National Liberals and Union Save Romania, the most right-wing force here in terms of economic values. Um, so they have this idea that the entrepreneur, the manager, he is the one that moves society forward. I mean, it is like I told you, it's 1989 again, and they have the same kind of rhetoric and Cold War rhetoric that Russia is our enemy. They are the enemies because they brought us communism and they conquered us and they are to be feared, and we have to buy a lot of weapons to defend ourselves from the Russians, and this rhetoric is dominant. And we have catastrophes here in Romania. I mean, just 2 days ago, you know what happened? 4 people were burned and they died in a fire in a hospital in Romania. You may think, oh, okay, 4 people or 5 people, this is not too much. Well, this comes after we had, like a few years ago, the incident of Collective where 60 people died in a fire. And just a few months ago, 10 people died in a fire in another hospital. And the idea is, oh, we should not invest much in healthcare. No, we are investing the lowest sums of money from the European Union. We are investing less than Bulgaria. We are the last ones in terms of how much we invest in healthcare. And people are brainwashed with this propaganda, oh, we should not invest in healthcare because they are corrupt and they are going to steal the money. So the ministry, the prime minister came and he said, oh, everybody has to do the job he or she is paid for, or else I'm going to fire them all. Really? And who is going to take care of the, you know, patients? Right now, during the pandemic, you have the nerve to come with this type of threats. I mean, and the unions are not powerful enough, because I think the right response, the right answer to such blatant arrogance would have been a general strike. Oh, you say we should leave? Okay, we'll leave. Bye. Let's see what you're doing right now with all of you. Go there and take care of them. If you think it is so easy to do this job, okay, we'll leave. We'll leave all the hospitals and we'll leave you to do the job. And unfortunately, the unions have been dismantled in 2012 by another right-wing government, and it is very difficult to unionize. But I see right now, I see a movement, I see that they are moving. In January they started protesting, but we don't have a lot of workers that are in these unions, and unfortunately unions have a bad name. Because of the propaganda, and also because of union leaders that switch, you know, sides and became politicians and business men and women, the successful ones, and betrayed the workers that put them there. We also have this phenomenon. So it is difficult, but I think the unions are the way to go, and to form unions and to keep pushing, because it is outrageous. I mean, in a country where you had such a catastrophe, and they just froze the salaries, because we had a law back in 2017 saying that the wages should that should rise the wages of all the medical personnel, all the ones working in a hospital, but the nurses and the doctors were given a raise in advance. And it was supposed that the race for the other categories of people that work in the hospital should be done, you know, in 4 stages until from 2017 until 2022. But now the government said, we are not going to give you anything. We gave the doctors and the nurses, that's it. We are not going to give you for the rest. And you know, a hospital, of course, the doctors and the nurses are very important, but all the people that work in a hospital are important. If you want a hospital to be efficient, you have to think about everybody and not to create these hierarchies and inequalities where a person earns like 250 euros and another person earns 10 times more. This is not okay. And in the public sector, you know, and they created this division and this crazy thing that happened now. And now after the tragedy, after this horrific tragedy where 5 people died because of a fire in a hospital, and I told you this is happening from time to time in Romania, they said, we are going to fire you if you don't obey. Can you imagine the blatant arrogance? And this is the person that in 2008, Florin Câțu, the actual prime minister, said, we should stop the propaganda. Healthcare and education are not priorities. The private sector is a priority. I mean, these people are saying things that in a normal society would have been, you know, that would have been the end of their career, even in a country like, I don't know, the most right, I think even in United States would have been, you know, very difficult to come up with such nonsense. But in Romania, and it is very important, this is why I engage in this project with the Barricade, because the propaganda is so powerful, but now I see self-movement in the unions and in some activist organizations. People are beginning to be more open-minded and more open to leftist ideas.
Yes, and I would like to ask you about this project Barricade, because the name Barricade is for me connected with the revolution, with the strike, with the stuff like this. And if we in your channel we can find many guests which they present themselves like anti-capitalist, Marxist, communist, or people like this. And what is your objective for the future? Because you know that Marx are said in the 11th These of Feuerbach that the philosophy only interpret the world, but we have to change it. And do you want to change the world? Do you have the projects for, I don't know, build the net of the workers from the Eastern Europe, made the Eastern European workers' revolution?
Well, I think these are very idealistic objectives. I would be happy if we, and this is where me and Boyan, you know, we complement each other, because I'm more of a pessimist and he's very optimistic and visionary. I'm more, you know, with little and control objectives. Well, my objectives in the short run would be to keep the thing running, because it is very important to say these things, and to say it constantly and systematically. Maybe not now, but in 10 years, if we keep saying these things, we are going to build an audience. And of course, our main constituency and target are workers. And we are trying to get closer to unions. And we invite constantly, also from Romania, but from other parts of the world, and also we invited you in our show, because this is our main constituency, workers, unions, and we are trying to build bridges. And it is very important also for the Romanian unions to see that they are not alone, and to develop this type of Eastern European alliance between unions and union leaders. We aim to organize an event with a union leader from Bulgaria and one from Romania during this maybe the March of April, if we are able to do it. And we are trying to build this type of alliance. And also, I'm not pretending to be objective, you know, as a journalist. No, I try to inform people from the critical perspective on economy, on society. I will not tell them, look, I'm ideologically neutral, because I don't think such a thing exists. It is better to say, look, I'm a liberal and I'm going to present you the things from this perspective. I'm a socialist, I'm going to present you things from this perspective, because the perverse ideology is the one that you suppose, oh no, I have no ideology, I'm neutral. You cannot be. I don't think you can, you know. And the important thing is to keep fighting.
Okay, but keep fighting, but I all the time try to understand fighting for what? Well, can you show example of the movement in the world which you can said that it is example for example, if somebody asks me this question, I will say that for me it is example for Russian Revolution in 1917 or Cuban Revolution, that it is the purpose which I going. And for you?
Well, I think that's a tough question. You know, I think one of the problems, and I also have this problem, is that I don't share a common utopia, you know. We are disillusioned and a little bit pessimistic. But of course, I would like to see a major change. First of all, I think we have to identify the problem. I would like the Russian Revolution to occur again, but I would like it to be different in one way. I would change not the focus on the means of production, but on competition. Because let's say you have, as Richard Wolff says, democracy at work, and the workers have a vote and have a say in what's being produced, when it's being produced, with what resources, where it's being sold. Okay. But if these companies are in a constant competition, then you haven't changed much. There is a need to identify the problem here. And I think competition and the competitive production of profit is an even bigger problem, you know. And this is the direction I would go, because when you have this type of competition, it is very difficult to change things fundamentally. The first one. And the second one, you see, it was so difficult, it was so easy in a way to reshape production and to reorganize production, because it was so easy to reorganize public life. But unfortunately, what happened was that the feudalist patriarchy was replaced by the socialist patriarchy, because it's so much easier to say, look, we are going to reorganize the way we work, but so much difficult to tell to a man, stop beating your wife. It is as easy as that. So you see, I would go for the tackling the problems with competition, and also tackling the problems of private life, you know, because otherwise you would have a socialist patriarchy. It is not enough to reorganize production and to offer women a place in the labor market. You also have to change things, and it could be done easily, like offering men paternity leave, or even a higher paternity leave to make them closer and make them more engaged in child caring, and offering them, you know, a flexible working hours, so they could be the ones that take care of the child. I would also think that would reduce a lot of the violence, if you'd ask me. Because once you see how difficult it is to actually raise a child and not be just a weekend parent, you will think twice before taking a life, you know, when you see how difficult it is to produce one and to maintain one. And these are the things that I would fight for.
Yes, I think that in the analysis of the Richard Wolff, there is it's not enough, because the democracy at work is important, but I think that the problem of the workers, the main two problems are exploitation in the work, but also we have the market society, which is problem also. And we saw this for example in the beginning of the pandemic, that in weeks, in the time of the 3-4 weeks, we have the prices of the mask and other things are rising. And I think that it's if we not eliminate the market, the society with the workers collapse. They will have also big problems, and it will be not egalitarian society. So my revolution, it is liquidation the market and the dictature in the work, which is now. But what do you think about this? Elimination the market.
Yes, and I will also include, as I told you, because the market, what does it mean? The competitive production of profit. Okay, and this is crucial, and even in Marxist theory, this is crucial, the competitive production of profit, because if you have workers' co-ops competing, you have workers trapped in the same competition, you know, for profit, and this has to go. And the state has to have a very important role, and it has to be inclusive. And there are a lot of things that need to be changed, and to bring people closer to the democratic process, and to have some sort of limits of how much you can earn in a society, because otherwise you would have huge inequality, and democracy is just another word for nothing left to lose. I mean, democracy is just a fake show where money can buy anything. And we see that now. We see that at work. I mean, these people have the money, I mean, the right-wingers in Romania, and buying all the media to tell that everything is okay. And people buy it, you know, and accept their arrogance, which is, you know, unbelievable. So, and I will also change, as I would told you, the private sphere, and I would question gender not in terms of the current debate. I mean, from an individual point of view, but from a class perspective, as I discussed with Harriet Fraud. I mean, you have to have sexual education, you have to have paternity leave, you have to have all sorts of measures that, and free maternity leave, free daycare. This is very important to also reorganize the private life, but from a class perspective, not from an individualistic perspective. And you can say to women, oh, you can be the vice president of the US also. Yes, and be the equal of men in a very oppressive system. No, thank you. I want equality for all of us, you know, and class liberation. And actually, I invited Albena Asmanova because she has a very interesting book on the competitive production of capital, and how this also has to go. Not only the ownership of the means of production has to be changed, but also this type of competitive production of profit. And she also discusses this paradoxes of emancipation, that individually you will become emancipated in a system that is oppressive, And this is the feminist struggle is some sort of failure by success. I mean, we entered the job market, but we entered and we are the equals of men in an oppressive system and in an exploitative system. And this has to change. We have to work together with men to change this for everybody, because patriarchy is not hurting women, it's hurting men just as well.
So I would like to ask you a question about Romania in the context of the Lenin, who said that the revolution will start in the Russia because Russia is the weakest chain of the capitalism, and I think that Poland and Romania are the weakest place in the European Union. But in the other hand, I saw that in France, for example, we have struggle. I can say that in 2nd of February in my workplace there will be strike. And it is
good for you.
Yes, but
fingers crossed that you managed to earn some things, important things.
Yes, it is because they want to stole us our prim, which are because they use the explication of the COVID that now society is, but it was the money which we earn all the year, not our wages, but it's extra money which for the recycling of the papers, for the how many people are ill, how many we have the products which are broken, and how many reparation we have there are in the society, and there are not many people ill. We have recycling, and we earn 900 euros because we all the month we saw this sum how many money we will, and now they don't want to give us 900, they would want to give us only 150. Yes, because they said yes, we know, but in COVID we have because many costs and things like this, and we can't give it because if one time we will accept it, in other next years there will be not this prim because they they always try find the explication for not give it,
not giving the money.
Yes. But what is the perspective for the workers in the Romania? They strike, they are organized, or they are...
Yes, we have unions, important unions, and this January there were strikes here in Romania and protests. They went and they protest in front of the representatives of the government and in all the cities, and we had some sort of tournament of the protesters that started from the northern part of the country and ended up in Bucharest, and they want to negotiate with the prime minister and the ministers. But it is very difficult for the time being. I don't see no revolution. People are disillusionized and are disenfranchised and are pessimistic, and it is very difficult to bring some sort of ray of hope for them. And this is why I think the leftists don't win, because people don't believe it. There has to be a revolution in the head. This is why I think Marx isn't right all the time when he says that philosophers only analyze. It is very important to analyze. And, peace is a war that is being waged with words. We have to be there and we have to convey this message to the people, because the revolution has to start in the head. I think the socialist regime fell because people started to lose trust in it. Nobody believed, even the elites. And this is the point where we should be headed. And I think this is the point where we are headed, not in Romania, but look what happens in the United States. Almost more than half of the millennials are very open to socialist ideas. Look what Richard Volz says, that like 15 years ago, his ideas and his speeches would have been just ignored by the vast majority of people. And now they are not. People are starting to listen, you know, and this is very important. The revolution has to start in the head, in my opinion, because right now people still believe this BS that's being sold to us with individualism, meritocracy, anti-corruption, the Western as being the, you know, guiding light for us, and we being here the poor, stupid, barbaric people that has to emulate that wonderful countries from the West. They have no you know, they are not familiarized with decoloniality and with decolonial theory and stuff like that, critical theory. And they have to be familiarized with that because they start to listen once you tell them. And even in Romania, we started to have two media outlets, the Liberty as it's called, that hired critical intellectuals that publish a lot of important articles on inequality and the unjust system that we are experiencing, and another mainstream figure, Dragoș Pătraru, that is speaking out against this system. So things are starting to move, and more people are starting to listen. And when there will be enough, maybe a political party, and not the political party that we had, because we had the political party, the Social Democrats, I told you, that organized the tournament to the churches, and we also had Demos. I was among the founding members of this tiny political party that was formed a couple of years ago, but it ended up in sexual, you know, debates around transsexuality, around women's representation, and all sorts of things that, unfortunately, while important, are not as connected as important for the Romanian working class as we might like it to be at some point. And we have to accept that. And maybe a political force will soon be formed and will somehow manage to take this growing frustration of the working class and use it to really start a revolution.
Okay, thank you for all things which you said. I think that all the viewers can go to your channel, Baricade, yes, your site internet in English. And I think that your idea with Bojan, that trying to create these relations in the Eastern Europe, is very, very good job. Nobody before in the you started something which don't exist 40 years before in Commoson. It was this, but after, so you have good job, and
thank you so much. I wish the viewers to go to our Patreon also, because we are financially strained like any media, independent media outlet. And thank you very much for having me on your show. It was a real pleasure discussing with you.
For me
Thanks
also. So bye.
Bye.